Tony, we got a really great question on the YouTube channel this week about whether or not technique is protected by copyright. So, when it comes to creating content, what do we need to know about technique and being protected?
So the word technique, I think, is a bit vague. So I think I'm going to break it down in terms of two prongs. First prong, if we're talking about technique in terms of the way that film is shot or video is shot, that's where it can get a bit tricky because the Copyright Act of 1976 doesn't really lay out necessarily if the way you film some type of content is necessarily protected under copyright law. Certainly, it could drive to the question of it being original that's warranting copyright protection as a collective whole, but the technique itself of like maybe painting the camera in a certain way, that's up for debate. Naturally, I'm thinking of like, let's say Quentin Tarantino, who commonly in his videos or in his movies rather always has like that rapid zoom at a character. Always at the end of the films, there's always like blood everywhere, and there's like a shootout or a fight scene, what have you. But I guess if we're talking about in that context, that question might come up more in the context of actual case law. If let's say there's another content creator that mimicked or copied frame for frame the way of some type of content was filmed and the technique of that film, that's going to drive at the heart of whether or not there was substantial similarity that took place. Copyright infringement claims rely obviously on whether there was a right that was violated, a valid copyright, but in addition, the infringer had to have access to the original work and there had to be substantial similarity. And case law has pretty much laid out very clearly that substantial similarity is the MacGuffin here. It's the key prong that's going to lay out if there's going to be a successful copyright infringement claim. So if you have all the proof there that this another content creator had access to the original work and emulated it frame for frame, then that's a matter of whether or not, in the eyes of a court or if it were a jury trial, if that's going to amount to substantial similarity. And I can't really give a clear answer on that because that's more fact specific. But if we're talking about technique more in the lens of like a dance routine or choreography, generally speaking, that's where it also gets complicated because the Copyright Act of 1976 actually does not lay out any definition whatsoever of what is choreography or any type of dance move necessarily. You actually have to go to the House report at the time that the Copyright Act in 1976 was being drafted. And our legislatures laid out that choreography should not amount to simple dance routines like doing the waltz or anything that would be deemed simple in nature. Then we have the compendium, which is a resource that the U.S. Copyright Office has provided to users who are registering their copyrighted works. And in the compendium, they lay out that choreographic works are a sequence of dance moves that are complicated in nature that together are worthy of being protected under copyright law. So the perfect example, think of like, doing the like maybe the cha-cha slide at your uncle's wedding. That might not necessarily be worthy of copyright protection because it's a bit too simple. But in contrast, think of all the single ladies dance that Beyonce does. That is registered in the Copyright Office as a choreographic work because beyond doing this, there's all the other complexity of the dance moves. Again, together, cohesively work together, and that's worthy of copyright protection. And this is actually a position that I feel is, worthy of reason why there should be some type of amendment to the Copyright Act. It's a bit antiquated, and I feel like ambiguity like this has bred a lot of questions. And certainly on a space like TikTok, where you're seeing tons of choreographic works and a lot of artists not being properly credited for their works, I feel like the reason why that is because the Copyright Act isn't even giving the proper guidance of what is worthy of being protected as a choreographic work. So hopefully that answers your question, but that's essentially, if I had to break down what technique meant in that context, that's how I would break it down. And, for the viewer out there, hopefully that answers